All right, so in today's video, I want to talk about basically a double curve situation, and there's a kind of a couple of ways you can create it. One is you can turn something into a sphere, and then just take something like a cylinder. And a cylinder is a very interesting shape. You know, people are like, I don't see this guy use a lot of circles, and that's because circles are computationally expensive, and when it comes time to pay the piper, every vert of a circle is something you're going to have to pay for. So, like, even this one, to pay the piper, 32 rounds in the chamber. And there's a chance that half of these are going to be split decisions having to be made. So, you know, the rules of booleans and sub D is basically you can add subdivisions to the object, and that will allow the booleans to transition more fluidly. However, if we look at the amount of geometry involved in this by turning off the optimal display, we can see that this amount of geometry to solve would actually take a little bit longer than I would like, and in the end would probably not be considered a victory. So instead, let's rethink this. We'll snap our cursor slightly. Instead, I'm going to replace this QOT. And instead of replacing it with that, we'll replace it with a cylinder and just change the axes. Maybe give it 8. There we go. So now we have our cylinder in place. We'll just replace that one. And we could actually take this down to, say, 2. So, you know, I actually will do a low round practice round, where this is actually lower than the rounds that I would normally even attempt to solve. And this isn't even a problem that I'm attempting to solve. This is just probably a play off of a previous one. But let's just take these and union them together. And from here, I will convert visual geometry to mesh. And this is what we're looking at. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Merge them at last. We also want to control the directional flow. So that means I'm going to put a loop here and lightning bolt between these because I want a quad flow happening. For this one, we're going to jump this one to the nearest cylindrical junction. Same with this one. Doesn't matter, we can get quite rough with this, I see. We'll jump these two to the next junction. Same with these. These are a little bit more questionable. They're crucial for holding the form, but they're not crucial for holding that area. But I could guarantee you that by removing them, we lost a bit of definition that we probably did not want to lose. So it's like, how do we want to deal with this particular decision here? And that's the thing with topology, is it's a bunch of split decisions that you have to make. But I always opt for the decision that results in destroying the least amount of form. So it's not an easy battle, but it's definitely one that you got to play and you got to get better at. I mean, hopefully I never presented our tools as a one-stop shop for avoiding the rules that come with making proper geometry in this world of 3D modeling. You know, unfortunately, no one has solved that. Anytime a fancy solution hits the streets, like looking at you quad remesher, I immediately will give it a shot just to see if it's the thing that's going to change everything, you know. And more often than not, it always is something that's not the case. In fact, with quad remesher, they kind of proved our theory that in order to get a form, you got to really give it the geo, and there's no way around it, is kind of the rules of that thing. I mean, I would demo it, but I'm DRM locked out of it on this computer, so that's that. And so this area is a little bit of a conundrum, because if I were to just bevel this as a test, it looks like it'll actually take it. So here we go. We've actually spaced this out in a very simplistic format. Just a little slide here, a little push there, nothing major. And so we're just going to grab this and we're going to Control B, bevel it, roll the wheel once, and press P. And we can press A and go back to adjusting the amount of buffer that we're doing. But anytime I set the profile to 1, it's basically me setting up a buffer to protect me from what's about to happen. And these are important, you know, protecting the perimeter is essential, which is why you should definitely do it when you're in a point of control. If you do it willy-nilly, you end up with situations that are more difficult to control later with a topological flow that isn't really yours, I guess is a way to put it. So we'll mark this. We'll not mark that, and let's just sub D this. So we see that half of it came out all right. We mirror to the other side. We see that we did not even work very symmetrically. But if we press Alt V and we get out a wire, we see that we lost quite a bit of definition, kind of working on this thing in a subdivided state or a very non-subdivided state, which is why you do need a little bit of geometry in order to keep your form. You can't just solve it on super low. I mean, if we wanted to, we could just go in here, Shift A, add a cube, hit it with a sphere cast, and just select this mesh, select this one, and we do a shrink to, and then, you know, we just select this mesh, go in and get rid of this geometry from the vertex group. In fact, this is the only stuff that we want to shrink wrap. Assign a new group. And I'm sure there's actually easier ways I could be doing this through the helper, but old habits and waking up. So we also want to set this one to be just shade wire, just so that way we can see what we're projecting. So basically we can reproject it back to its original form. And in this case, this is the point in which we would want the shrink wrap to be after the sub D. So it's actually shrink wrapping the subdivision geometry. Otherwise it'll be problematic, but we definitely want that good geometry being shrink wrapped. In fact, if we take a look at our vertex group, I'm wondering if we could add even this last one, but that probably would actually be a step too far. But now we actually have a good shape compared to what we were dealing with previously. In fact, if we look at this, this is what we have just on the, you know, the geometry. I mean, the actual truth is this. This is what we're actually dealing with, but you know, Blender likes to butter you up a little bit, show you its most efficient self now, which I'm not against at all. But we take a look at this, and this is the shape. I mean, roll around the old car paint, and that's that. And it's because it's just a mesh being projected onto another mesh. So as long as it has enough geometry to make it, we can see a few knots just right in there, just a little bit, just because I got a little bit iffy with it. But if we add another level, it's being projected even better, just giving us just that perfect result. In fact, the transition isn't the best. For some reason, I just am not the biggest fan of what's going on there. So let's actually go in and play with the scale. There it is. And so I'll just alt click to try to select it, and that won't work. Sometimes it's just so hard to select a cube. If we just scale it in, we could actually get it to work just right. So that's actually my fault a little bit, but I should probably show how you're actually in control of that result. But it is also kind of nice to just quickly give something a little lip. You know, we could still move this thing around and just choose how we want this thing projected if we were just really trying to get this very particular shape right. So let's not do that. Let's just get where we're trying to go, which is about here. However, it feels a little lumpy inside of this region, so it's like, is it even worth changing, or is this just a lesson learned for dealing with lower sub D amounts? And because we applied it, we actually lost a little bit of volume, and now that we're shrink wrapping, we're actually overcompensating, because when we you know, it's just to show that theory in action. We have a cube, we put a subdivision surface, and as we add it, it could be that it's shrinking more and more. I don't know. In any case, we'll save this as mtest4. In fact, let me go in and do my typical thing that I always do with things, and that is at least get a nice render result. we'll convert this to a curve, set it smooth, and just alt click this to give it an emissive material. If we look at this in the render mode, we can just start slapping this with the material scroll till we get the nice result that we want. Alt VV, find a nice environment, press Q to turn on that bloom, and we just let this thing play. And that is the first example of the day. So lesson learned with the sub D shrinkage, because solving that's definitely going to be a little bit of a pain. I mean, I could actually play with the offset amount until I get something just right, but really it's almost endearing, but it's not what I asked for. So it is one of those things that I always think about that, because the client will also say the same thing. They'll be like, I didn't ask for that crease. Like, yeah, but I made it by mistake, and it's a lovely little crease. You're like, shut the hell up and fix it before I fire you. All right, so we will blank material scroll again, but definitely on just this area. And just to really christen this thing, let's put a bevel on it. And I'm going to press L and set that to be only on the limit method in this area. And it's because of the immense amount of sub Ds that we're just slapping on this piece that it's just not going to let us roll like that. In fact, we actually have double loops in some areas. So now we could probably go up a second level. And then we look at this, and now do we have a final bevel on it? It's actually looking like something worth presenting, just a shining beacon in the dark to just let people know what's going on. And then of course we can just mirror this below. So I mean, if there's a lesson to be kept away from this extended version that you're watching, is that don't take the shortcut. In fact, let's use symmetry, and let's just mirror this straight down, which basically means that the geometry is real on this version. And let's just grab it instead of using a modifier as I was previously doing. And I just like pulling these things in and just seeing how these things work. Because making an innie is just the opposite of making an outie, and we see that the surface is sort of holding. I could just see a few nicks just every now and then, but I'm telling you, I over obsess, you guys. I'm terrible about it. Just get obsessed with a goal. Sometimes if that goal is topology, it's like a Tetris to me. I've got to get a Tetris, But I'm letting you guys know that, once you get it to about this level, you're pretty much good to go until you're ready to begin doing the next cut. So I mean, this is usually part of the finalization stage of these sort of things, but normally I don't even have to deal with these sort of things in my general work, because I'm able to really just fandangle the result to get exactly where I want. But when it comes to these sort of cuts, they are things that when I do make them, I'm like, do I feel like solving this, or do I want to solve this now, or do I want to slice this out and solve it in a special way and make this a very special piece because it has a very special part on it. So let's see, those books. Oh, all right. Let me take a snapshot and send that real quick. Tell you, there's always so many things happening when I'm in the middle of recording, but they are always crucial. I'm not complaining when they're crucial. So I think I have my intel I need to do my demo. In fact, we'll save this as mtest just for these topo tests that I've been doing. In fact, we'll just let that save. So before I start, I also want to open yesterday's example, which is the thing that I'm kind of going for. And it's this thing, which is basically an integration of this piece into this area. And you can see it kind of break down in shading in a little bit of areas, but This is what happens when you do it by hand. But as far as the final result goes, this is probably as good as it gets when it comes to dealing with these sort of things manually. So I did want to do a video talking about the process because it is something that I feel that the more people understand these sort of things, the better they'll be at dealing with topology, especially before they get in and begin hacking things and begin transferring normals and whatnot. These are the ways that you can actually, keep your mesh fairly consistent and logical across applications and workflow. So, and it's also my general way of working over the years. So it can be hard to explain sometimes. All right, so let's do this. So also the thing is I'm supposed to be doing this video where it's in motion. So I want to solve the topo while the mesh is moving. And what that means is I'm going to slap a bevel on it like so, and then we will spin it like so, and then we'll cut a cylinder into this shape. And you'll probably be wondering why I always use a screw, and I don't know, I just like the screw, bite me. So we'll insert a cylinder, just 32 rounds. This is a gun, by the way, so every cylinder you insert is 32 rounds of a gun that you're gonna have to deal with at some point. You're gonna have to lick the barrel. And so, we'll take this, merge it together. So let's talk about the camera work, because I wanna shift and set up basically a bounce camera. And we'll just align that bounce camera to look at it like so. And we'll just be working it like this the whole time. In fact, I might want to even select the empty and just maybe set it up to be like that. However, I think if I set it to something like 9,000 frames, we could actually talk about this in a regular manner without it being insane. Because if the camera's bouncing insanely, I'm not gonna be able to solve a lot of topo and talk at the same time. So that's gonna be tough. But I do want the time-lapse version when I speed it up to just show it rotating as I'm talking. So I'll basically be solving topo and working in the camera view the whole time, and then just moving this empty whenever it's needed in order to just get in here and just focus on things. So I'll just be solving this little sawtooth situation that comes up, which is actually going to be a little tough. There'll probably have to come a point in which I'll need to just split the view like you're seeing here, and then finally get underneath and begin solving things, which is kind of breaking the rules a little bit, but I think we can work this out. I mean, in fact, I could come in, start the video immediately, and just be like, you know what, we're gonna duplicate our current layout, and we're going to just remove the timeline after we set our time, because I don't need it for the purposes of this, and we won't need these windows, so we can just go ahead and remove them. And so it'll just be us fixing topology, working like so. And if we need a regular layout, we can go back to layout, where we basically have the camera just set up to play like this, or I don't know, maybe even have a full screen layout set up. I don't know. And this is, we're just talking about the behind the scenes of setting up this ridiculous video where I'm solving a crazy topo problem. So, I mean, this could be the layout right here, and I just get in and solve it while the camera's just rotating. However, this does make me want to make the bounce only be able to bounce in the way that I want it to. So if we go back to the beginning, right? Like, let's say we go back to layout and we make this thing 600 frames. I bet there's a way I can make this boomerang only, in fact, let's just make it 60. So it's going too far the other way. So we could take this and just make it where it goes only this far, right? And to do that, we can just put a limit rotation on it and just limit the Z. Look, now the thing's frozen. So is the most minimal of Z will allow. And this is the most maximum that we'll allow. So it's that to that to that to that. All right, that's actually kind of hacking, by the way. I would also need to make it animate to go dolly underneath, like a cockpit view. Like, I wonder how I could set that up. Cause it'd be crazy, right, to be able to model in like a camera view with the timeline playing. I mean, you know, surely I'm not the first man to have dreamed such things. All right, gotta minimize all these windows distracted me. Sorry, I'm over here getting distracted, just being distractified. Never let yourself be distractified. So let's do this. We're setting this up, and let's say that we're working this side right here, the only side we're working. And so we deselect cube, bring in our camera, but we look at it from this side only, and we only need it to focus on this side. But it goes all the way around and then comes all the way back to where we need it. This one's gonna be a little tough. You know, I could just set it to like 9,000 frames, but really I just don't need to see so much. I really just need to focus on the area that matters, which I bet is also a possible solution. Probably wondering what the hell I'm doing. I'm just playing with the camera, just see if I can get the camera to be useful for this scenario. So there we go, we just solved it. So now we could really look at this thing, right? We could even get real crazy where we rotate this. Well, we can't rotate like that. Let's snap our cursor to it, and we'll put a empty around it. You know, if one empty can't solve it, then how many empties does it take to screw in a light bulb? I don't know, but we're about to find out. So we'll just parent that to this, and so we got it just like that. But now we have the ability to dolly it underneath, where you can really look at this from some interesting views. And it's inside of this other object's parent matrix, so we're still able to keep it focused on this area. I don't want to fail the challenge. I told a random person on Twitter my next video is going to be in motion, and damn it, it's going to be. So let's give it the 8,000 frame test. You know, we're not ready to go over 9,000. We're just going to be really just pouring slow. Damn, I ain't got that kind of patience, actually. I mean, I do for the purposes of the demo, but for the purposes of this demo of the demo, probably not. But something like that, where it's just bopping around, and we just rotate it to get it to focus on just the area that we want, where it just rotates around it, just lets us talk about it. Like, it's kind of crazy, you know, because I want to talk about solving this, but also want to have fun doing it, because I mean, I already solved it. Solved it on a laptop, I solved it in bed, solved it on the couch, I solved it in this office, just ready to solve it for good. And I think we have a solution. So that is the making of for this. I think I'm ready to do my first take recording. No, I'm not. I don't have the confidence, you guys. It happens to the best of us. You know, we call it tutorial impotence. You know, you just can't get your mic up, you know. No, I got this. All right, let's do this. Hello everyone, Master Xeon101 here, and I figured in today's video I would start off doing a bit of a topological demo. So we'll start off looking at this in front view, and I'll just take the cube and delete it, and we'll just Shift A, insert a plane, and we'll divide this plane in half and just delete the other side I'm going to select this point and just control click mark in order to bevel this one point. And I'm just pressing 2 a couple of times to get it to profile 0.5. And we're just rolling it in with about, let's give it 12 segments. And from here, we can actually take this and spin it under modifiers using screw. And because it's blue, it means we're good to go. So I will just go ahead and sharpen this. Keep in mind that with these screw shapes, you still have a seam down the middle. And people always ask why I opt to use these screw shapes instead of just cylinders. And it's always because of the non-destructive control that I have with modifiers. But really, I just like starting with these things is just a test, and I just became used to it. So we will just go ahead and delete this interior edge, which has now changed the rules of the game. You can see it in wire mode, but you can't see it in solid. And what I mean by that is that the normals got flipped. So if we press Alt V and we press face orientation, we can see that the normals have gotten flipped. And you can't just go in and just press Shift N because this isn't a real mesh, it's a modifier generated mesh. So instead we have to press Control tilde and choose Calc Order, or we could hit flip, which will just flip it, but in this case we want to use Calc Order. So now that our mesh is blue again, we can press Alt V and turn off face orientation and we're good to go. If you didn't have that dealt with, then you would have been dealing with Boolean issues down the line. So we're going to insert a cylinder, but instead of a 32 round cylinder, I'm going to actually lower the amount of pane and take it down to 24. And we're just going to rotate this cylinder and place it where we need, scale it out on the x-axis to create a very particular double angle conundrum. In fact, this is a kind of a triple angle trouble situation that we're going to be solving today, but hopefully we should be able to get in and out pretty promptly and learn some tips in the process. So we'll select both of these, press Q, and under Boolean select union. And now that they're union together, I'm just going to press 1 at the top to go back to my general layer. And we can just select this and press Control A, visual geometry to mesh, no holds barred. We're going to solve this. So in order to, for the memories, we'll just save that shape. And we're just going to get in here and just begin solving things. So the main thing with this sort of topological situation is the idea of maintaining curvature, topological control, and containment. And by being able to do that, you should be able to have a pretty well-controlled, well-shaded approach or result. But otherwise, you end up with something that's a little more random. Also, for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll be doing this tutorial in motion. So what that means is I will deselect everything, press Q, and we will just shift-click Add Camera to set up a bounce camera. And instead of positioning the camera, we're going to go in and actually position it by press Control on numpad 0. But before that, I actually want to press Shift G and select the parent of this, which is this empty. I guess it's easier to just select the empty in the outliner. And we can actually position it around the troublesome area, like so. And we'll also press Shift S, snap our cursor here, Shift A, and put a second empty around it, which will be kind of our parent for this rotating empty. You'll see why as we move on. And so now when we rotate this empty, we're able to move the camera, but the empty is also perpetually rotating the camera. So let's go ahead and position our camera exactly where we want to look and work today, and set our frames to 9,000. And let's begin working. Also for this, I want to duplicate my setup in order to create a second setup, just in case we have some view related issues. We can just stop mucking around and get to work, but I don't think we'll need this immediately. So let's just go in full screen mode. And it's definitely rotating, just a little slow actually. So let's make it a little funner. We'll make it 3,000. And let's solve this topology in motion. I know, weird challenge. So with this area, we want to just merge these here, Do the same with this one, select these two. It can be a little tough. Merge them, select these two. Well, that one, that one, that one, that one, merge. Select this one, this one, this one, merge. Select this one, merge. We can just slide this one over, and we see that we're outside of our view a little bit. So that's where we may want to pause and actually grab the main empty and just position it down, maybe even scale it out to just give us a little bit of room here so we can breathe. And we can continue on with our adventure. I was actually going to stop and slow down the timeline by adding more frames because it's being driven by the frame range. But I see that I'm actually capable of accomplishing this challenge, even though actually this is kind of crazy. Let's change it up to 9,000, which is the actual goal. And let's continue on with this. So the goal here is to merge it last, press K. We'll select this and just jump across, just really hacking our own flow. Pretty similar to the last video, where if the topology isn't going the way that you need it to, you need to make some choices. As far as this area goes, we may want to jump our timeline back to the beginning so we can reanalyze it. And this area almost doesn't need to exist. Same with this one. You know, this is where you have to make some very hard choices when it comes to maintaining curvature and determining which edges are going to actually be problematic down the road. But when it comes to solving this stuff, I mean, me personally, I've actually been solving this stuff so long that it's become like second nature. So I don't even think about the amount of decisions that have to be made with this. I always find it a enriching learning experience, but you know, that's just me. So continuing on, we can decide with this area that do we want to do anything to change the form, or do we just want to maintain this connection? Do we want to just make this quads and just keep going with a triangle there to terminate? And we'll find out that answer as we continue on with this. The goal is to get it to be able to take either subdivision or Boolean, which is the goal of a topological study. But now that the camera is actually turning around over here, we can begin kind of reanalyzing some of these areas. Like this area could be simplified. We definitely don't want our tries happening inside of this area, but if we skew this, it creates longer geometry that's going to begin causing some shading issues. So that's why I was saying that that area can be a bit of a conundrum. While we're looking at this, we might as well turn that into a quad and just continue letting the camera just take us around on a journey. In fact, I will tab out of edit mode, grab this empty and just move it over like so. And this is the part where you really want to have the empty. I mean, I'm not saying you should try to do this stuff in motion, but I am today. It's just that kind of day. So we're just moving the empty, not against the rules, written by me. And we'll just move that over, and we can start making some decisions here to begin consolidating this area. In fact, this one is actually a bit more of a conundrum. We actually want to offset all of the tension that's about to begin happening here from the level of rewrite that's about to begin happening in order to make this work. So just dissolving that really cleans that up. We'll slide this over, which will allow us to make that connection. We can do the same thing here, just join that, do a little bit of slide action. I feel like there's a double situation happening in here, so you really have to be cautious with these particular shapes. But I can't have the video not showing me where I'm looking or where I need to look on the mesh, so the empty will be needing some rotational adjustments for that. And also you got to be cautious with your sliding. In some cases, sliding can really compromise areas of the form that are being held secure by other areas. In fact, we can see that I got enough of a flow here to have a outside Tetris that allows me to just bring in a new connection, you know, bring in the boys and start really just working on things. But we see that I'm far enough in this area and the camera is going to begin taking me back. So that doesn't mean that we can't complete a little bit of work on the way out of here, and the next time we see it, it'll just be in better shape. So no double, no double, no double. And we'll just slide this stuff over, just move around a bit, and just see what we can improve on the way back. I mean, it's almost a interesting idea, and it all started from someone saying, you know, in fact, I'm gonna press Alt V, and we're just gonna turn off shadows, because shadows are really messing with me in this particular challenge as far as understanding things. I think shadows are trying to convey to me orientation, but instead they're reading to me as form issues. This area almost looks like it has a double due to, I don't know, we'll just say AA or something, but we can just slide, just a little sliding never hurt anybody. This area is actually so undefined that it makes me just want to do a connection just to give a little bit more definition to this. I mean, there's also the side of me that always wants to just give an extra piece of geometry in there to just give some extra definition, where I could begin offsetting things like you see me doing as I'm coming back around here, just selecting things and just messing around. And we'll just keep sliding as we're just letting the camera just take us on this journey across town while we look at things. This area isn't actually the most optimal solution, so we could actually optimize it even more by just merging these two maybe in the center of each other, which creates this situation. And you'd think that I would want to convert that into a quad, but I would probably actually rather put a lightning bolt in between and then turn those into quads and move it back around. Maybe even put a edge in between to ease some of the tensions with this part. And with this area, you know, we're just looking at it, maybe doing a little slide action. We don't have a lot of slide action we can do unless we put an edge here for now, but it does enlighten us to the fact that we can remove that one, but we need to be able to hand off its responsibility to someone more worthy. So that's probably where this one comes in mind. However, for this one, we want to put a lightning bolt in between and start making sanity of this area. And it actually is starting to make a little more sense as we kind of clean it up. However, the flow in this area is getting a little bit uncontrollable, but once we put a couple of quads in, a couple of triangle terminators just at the end, that should actually clean this area up enough. So the next thing is, what do we want to do with this? We might as well quad it, but if we quad it, that does validate this area's existence. So at this point, I do want to grab the empty and rotate a bit more so we can get some juicier angles whenever we're playing. So I'm just in here still modeling. And for all these areas that are about to be handed off to basically the geometry that I'm drawing, I just like to have things in place in order to prevent them from disrupting the surface around. So while this looks like I'm just playing a game with geometry, a lot of these decisions I'm making are, you know, pretty much the same decisions over and over. Inner edge terminations are essential for this because we want this to be able to flow, but we also want to have the form be held. So that's why there's so much kind of crisscrossing and merging and switching around happening, is because, you know, we can actually hold the shape and really just stitch together exactly what we want. These are just way too close to not be able to make the connection. So we come back through and we have a remedial look at what our choices got us. And this area I will just never like. So we could just terminate it, simplify it, and that could work to an extent, but I can guarantee you that this is going to be problematic later and come back to haunt us, because we you know, are solving topology on a moving mesh, not making excuses. I mean, that one doesn't even need to exist. So that actually makes this area have a lot more logical flow going to it. I mean, you got to watch it when you're sliding legacy pieces around, because those pieces are things that have already you know, established an important part of the form, so you don't want to slide those around too much. But as we're moving around, you can see that things get a little bit unruly, and you know, I'm bored, so let's grab this and let's grab this and correct it here. And was there a double there? Nope. So let's just last last. So now we have a quad flow at least being started up here, and we can start just merging these things while we slide that one back around, and then we can slide these back around, you know, maybe turn that into a quad, just slide some things around just to, you know, I always like to have just flowing geometry that kind of shows a little bit of a human touch to it. I spent a lot of time looking at machine generated geometry, and I'm like, how can I make mine not look like generated by a machine? You know, machines are so dumb. It's so rare for them to generate geometry that doesn't show like the worst traits of a human, right? Like auto retopo in a way shows like human sin, right? Of just showing a point. But I'm pretty sure that we've actually completed the solve of this thing, so we're just killing time at this point. I should begin actually rolling this towards a resolution. So we're just going to jump out of camera mode and reorient our view. Things are crazy. I'm just going to shift H and get rid of that. And let's test it. Here's what we get with sub D. This thing, ignore that. It's just an n-gon. You know, I always talk about how you can just quickly turn n-gons into quads. We can just delete a face and just select this and press Control F and just grid fill, and that's all quads now. But in the end, I don't even want that. That's not what I want. What I want is to hard mark it, and let's get out and take a look at our wireframe here. In fact, for the end, the same thing. We just want to mark it so it just holds. And this is the only area that really didn't work out for us. So let's turn off sub D in edit mode so we can see the truth. And you can see that things got very undefined in this area that this was one of the areas I was working. So in a way I failed the challenge. That means I'm gonna have to try it again. Maybe try it for the rest of the day. But we weren't able to get this connection made, which didn't make the sub D connection work out. But sometimes sub D will actually work out with the most minimal of geometry. Once you have an understanding of how sub D works and what it takes and what it doesn't take, you can actually kind of use that to your advantage to get particular results. So I'm always talking about it with people who specifically ask such questions, but I did also want to do a video kind of covering these sort of things as well. So now we actually have this shading with a slightly better result, but we can see that every one of these little doubles that we have, like this one, which didn't need to exist, we need to merge that one at last. This one doesn't need to exist. We merge that one at last, but we can take this one and set up a triangle dependency there just to give it more definition, but just to show in action, you know, what our solving got us. Is there a double here? All right, there is. Let's remark that and we're good to go again. We'll bring that back a little bit, and I'll just grow this, and our timeline is still playing. So I'll just shift select the boundary, and we'll just Control B roll that, and just press P and press A to go back to adjustment. And we can only go as far as we were willing to solve for giving this thing allowance, but this is basically our result. So we can see some areas just got a little bit clipped, a little bit out of bounds, which means that they possibly don't have to exist anymore, and we could just hand those off to their new flowing overlords that just kind of swept in and took over the joint. But that's how these things go with geometry. You know, sometimes you'll write a whole path for something, and then the entire next part of that branch will be taken care of by something completely irrelated. So we're just cleaning up a little bit more of our support geometry that we created, and now we're looking at our final shape. So, and this really isn't our final shape. I mean, the next thing from here is to press E, extrude it inwards, press E again, extrude, extrude, a little bit of extrude action. We could select this and control click mark in order to bevel just that one single area. I'm wondering why there's a second face showing on the inside. And I'm guessing that it's related to subdivision, solving with n-gon somewhere. There we go. modifier order always matters. So there's still a few questionable areas that I'd still like to kind of quiet down, like this area. Maybe just something like that would actually get us a slightly quieter result. Like I said, when it comes to topology, there is no winning or losing. You just do a little bit better every time, and hopefully learn a little bit more from it to help you in your adventures. But it's definitely one of those things that I recommend everybody get into Blender and spend a little bit of time studying. In fact, we look at this area and we see that, you know, geometrically, some elements just aren't allowed to live. So we should just decide, do we want this flow to happen? Do we want this edge to be in between that isn't even continuous because we don't even have a quad here? You know, if we change that to a quad, now we have a loop. Do we want that loop? And, you know, why not? It's a good loop. We'll keep it. So we'll dissolve that one as well, except we actually want to just merge it at last. And we could do the same thing here. I mean, every single one of these little inconsistencies that you saw is a step further in helping you get a nice mesh result. So you're only doing these sort of things for your own benefit whenever you're getting in here playing with the Boolean workflow. But now we see that the point at which we're looking at the mesh now compared to previously is definitely a lot better. In fact, we still have our previous version that we can just Alt-H to unhide. And let's just move that one up and take a look at that versus what we have now after going through just a little bit of touch and go for about 10 minutes on this particular shape. Keep in mind that this is a cylinder being cut into a beveled round shape. So there's almost 3 levels of curvature taken into account. There's the curvature of the cylinder, the curvature of this bevel, and the curvature of the actual solenoid kind of shape that we have here. In fact, to really wrap this thing up nicely, I can press Alt-X, and we will use symmetry to symmetrize this on the Z, and where I can just grab these elements and just press Control Numpad plus to grow, and just drag them inwards to create an any. And now we have, you know, this shape that I've been showcasing. In fact, in between, we can see that the geometry wasn't set up to be used in such a fashion, but no problem. So due to its simplicity in this case, we can just get in, make a few topological corrections, and wrap this thing up in no time. So now my new timeline in my head is set to half an hour at the emergency wrap time. And of course, the purpose of this video is to get you more connected with topology itself. If I wanted to just be super in and out, super duper fast, I wouldn't be rotating the camera and solving geometry at the whim of a camera, you guys. But, you know, this is more than a tutorial. This is Blendertainment. I can only hope that there's people out there, you know, enjoying these segments, but I definitely feel that topology is one of those things that we should be having to talk about as far as at least providing some content to help people learn how to best solve such issues. In fact, with this, we see that the geometry is just showing a little bit of knottage, and these sort of things are always just difficult to figure out how to configure topologically. So I'm sure there's actually a completely optimal solution that's out there for getting these things to look just right, but really in some cases, due to the geometry and the geometry you're attempting to converge, the best thing you can do is actually just make a choice between where you actually want these knots to be and where you want them to not be, by just ensuring that the areas that matter most prominently to your view don't have shapes that will cause topological issues. So we can actually see in this case that me going in and actually attempting to fix it actually made things worse. So sometimes over obsession is just not the answer. In fact, the correct answer for this, like let's say I really did want to just correctly project it, I'm just going to press P and separate a profile of this, and we'll take this time to add a modifier and screw. And this is the shape that we get. And of course we want to remove bevel, we want to remove subdivision, and we can actually up-res this to whatever level we want. But before that, let's select the main shape. Let's select the shape that we have, and under mesh tools we will shrink to, And let's go in here and just, I was going to just sharpen things, but if we sharpen things, it'll probably get caught by the limit method of weight that we're using. So I'm just actually going to just hide elements for this. I mean, we can also go in local mode and just turn off the shrink wrap modifier visibility for edit mode at this time. And I'm just continuing to hide things, just the simplest way to get through this in this case. And we'll just select everything and press Ctrl G, assign to new group. And now we can go to the modifier and just project from group that we just created. So if we come out of local mode, we still have this object sitting here solid. So we will just turn that to shade wire. But in order for you to see the result, let's split the view and let's just talk about, you know, because I see a lot of people shrink wrapping in the Facebook group. And I'm like, I don't know where you guys are shrink wrapping from. Like, I never really talked about the shrink wrap features, but I guess it's a collab thing or something. So we'll jump this up to 64, you know, maybe even, let's see, where is it? Shade smooth. Geez, this thing looks way more faceted than normal. Let's take this and actually move our shrink wrap up above the sub D, and that will actually probably be the answer. So now we can lower our spans to something like 32, and we can see that the shape, you know, just barely changed. Here we go. So at 12, you know, definitely something. 24, you know, starts looking pretty good. We're actually going to set this to 128 just because we want just a perfectly round shape that we're going to be projecting this area to. In fact, we could probably actually move subdiv above it, but we still get this strange faceting, which I assume is probably due to our modifier order that's being employed here. But now we actually have accomplished the result that I'm going for. In fact, this area will forever haunt me. In fact, I almost want to redo the entire video just to solve this area a little bit better in my topological decisions leading up to it. I'm pretty sure it had something to do with the amount of bevel spans that I had in this compared to double thinking my choice of using a 32 round cylinder and changing it to whatever level I used. But it's, you know, it's probably such a small thing in the scheme of things. Let's slap a blank material on it, and we take a look at this thing again, and you know, let's give it a faster camera angle. I'm just looking at the transitions for these areas. In fact, you think there's an area up there that's bad. I'm actually looking at an area down here. And the thing is, you know, when it comes to this stuff, you shouldn't run away from topology. If anything, you should be trying to study and understand this sort of stuff because it'll make you a better modeler and have a better understanding of subdivision. So let's look at this again. I almost wonder about this thing where I can just remove it from the active group, and if that helps, or if I can assign the active group if that helps. I mean, just a little knot, and it's a knot on a transition. So that's actually something that I would probably not permit. You can see that pretty much everything else around this area has a specific connection. Meanwhile, this area does not. So let's go ahead and just fix that because it's just a glaring issue right in front of my eyes. So we'll just redraw the connection, remove that one, creating that connection. But before that, we want to just have a convergence there. And now I feel that we are looking at something a little bit better for what we're going for. And I can see a few imperfections just kind of lurking in the surface, just letting me know that there's always a next time and that there's always more perfection to be had. But I'm determined to push modeling as far as it can go for solving these sort of things before I begin absolutely transferring my normals, since it does create a different type of workflow that I'm just not completely confident in its ability to be used everywhere. Especially when there's still so many programs that just absolutely crush normal information. I mean, one of my biggest complaints about ZBrush is how if you import anything with material indexes, it just destroys them. Just doesn't care. Put some material indexes, got an MTL, doesn't matter. Peace. Better forget about that. And I'm sure there's a way I could import as groups and polygroup it and do a bunch of ZBrush stuff, but I don't know. It's just one of those things, but it's nothing major. So, and who am I? I am but one person. So we'll select both of these, and I'll choose flatten and Shift C to snap this to the cursor. Let's try that again. Okay, let's snap our cursor to selected, and then we will use flatten, and I'll press Shift C, and it will put us directly at the cursor, which kind of shows us exactly how far we went with the topology overboard with solving this thing. I mean, I just wanted to put this thing at the 0 point, but it appears that we are too deep for that. So this shape will be a little bit bigger than usual. We'll actually set the origin to this location. Actually, we can't do that. And also, we want to remove that from the active group if we plan to move it at all, because it's being shrink wrapped. Sorry. So we will just snap our cursor here, and we'll take this shape and make it a collection. We'll just call it impart 1 or something. And now we can Shift A, insert a collection instance of impart 1, and we'll just place it here. That way we can be double haunted by our mistakes as we look at this model. And we'll just actually select this circle that's on the inside, and maybe this circle as well. It's a party, everyone's invited, and we'll use curve extract. Just make a curve and just material scroll, press TT to jump to emission, and we'll just find a nice emission. I mean, I just skipped over a pink. I probably would have wanted that. And we'll just put a little bloom on it. And because they're curve extractions, they're already added to the new collection. So I'm just, getting to the wrap up point of this. Just wanted to end this on a nice result, in case you want to haunt me with the next level. But I mean, these are a solenoid of sorts. Also, with this sort of stuff, I need to remove from active group in order to help it keep its existence. Otherwise, it will be just slaughtered by the shrink wrap. And I keep forgetting about that. So maybe something like that. And then let's say I wanted to make this a new piece. I can shift click curve extract to make this its own piece. And we'll just put a big bevel in it, which I guess won't work for this really complex shape. The good thing about 2-plate is it does keep all these modifiers, but the bad thing about it is it keeps all these modifiers. Sometimes it's important, sometimes, like in this case, it's not needed. So 2-plate is there for you whenever you need it. However, whenever it comes to adding blank materials, material scroll is there for you as well. I love scrolling through blank material and finding a random combination that just works. So the next thing we can also do for this is just select this piece, curve extract, scale it, maybe just set it to emission glow as well. And just keep in mind that everything I make gets added to this collection instance, just making our lives a little easier. The other thing is I could put a loop cut right here because of hashtag topology and just flatten that, just use it the old way instead of hotkeys. And let's see what's close to us. Nothing. So that means we can put a loop cut in here, press E, Alt S, maybe I, E, Alt S, maybe Control plus a couple of times. And you know, that's like the classic manual way that I used to make panels in hard ops. And we could just press Control G, remove from active group, maybe even hit it with a level of sharpening to just give it a hard sharpening. And we're already on our way to getting our final result. In fact, we let this play out and it's already looking pretty good. We're just having some fun here at the end. And of course, we could still be just playing around with topology and aiming for that ever higher level of perfection. But I'm here to tell you that if you're able to get it to the point where you can just get it to, you know, just look good and pass, then you definitely want to step back and ponder if you really want to get in here and continue perfecting things. Because even as I look at this, I'm going to continue to want to perfect things. In fact, I see that if I don't have the active material index selected, that the F tool gets a little weird. But everywhere you see a topological issue in the shading, it's something that probably could be solved by you getting in there and just being just a little bit more efficient. In fact, I see that the shading breaks down because it's not marked completely around. So if I wanted a very hard crease going around, and also because of the topology chosen for this, I didn't get a completely continuous loop. But because of the advanced curvature of the situation, I did want to come up with a more interesting solution to show you guys on this today. So let's Alt H. Actually, we can come out of local and just hide that thing. We don't need it. We can remove the rotation, set the scale, and maybe place our camera exactly where we want it, which is about here. And just move that out. And here we are just looking at our thing at the end. Of course, we can just hide that stuff. And all the stuff that's being hidden, I could always just unhide and just move it to the cutters collection, which means that, you know, I'm just done with it. The cutters is kind of my garbage collection where I just place things I no longer need at this time. But now we're able to just let this thing just play us out. Actually, let's look at it with some car paint. Always got to look at it with some car paint, don't we? Just to see what we're dealing with as far as these reflections go. So perfection is always something that I'll be struggling to get a little bit closer to. And I'll always feel like I get a little bit better in my tests than I do in my final results. But I spent a lot of time just letting different matte caps just pour across these models and just seeing what they tell me. In fact, my favorite is the zebra stripes because they really just let you know what's going on with the mesh. But just know that over obsession, sometimes it's just as bad as getting in there and just damaging every connection that you have with the geometry. So with that, we can wrap up this video and I'll see you guys next time. I don't know. I think I'm gonna re-record that one. I think I'm gonna redo that one. I don't know. Alright, working on the video over here on the side. Let's see, I was also planning on doing a lesson about insets as well. Let's see, MTest, where I want to show how people could use insets in order to make something like this easier. So I wonder what it would be like if I tried to model this just by the book, right? You know, people are always like, it's easier to do it by the book. Well, what's by the book? Let's see. We get a cylinder and we do this. We bevel it to get something nice and round. You know, we'll sharpen it. And so we want this geometry that's right here. And it's so hard to get a circle, you know. All right, and we'll just extrude that, and we'll right click and loop tools, turn it into a circle. And I just received a message, I'll just ignore it. And we'll actually slide some things around, which is a little unprecedented for such a technique. Now, you still make some hard decisions in this workflow. Like when you have to choose which way you're sliding things and you only have like 3 different directions, and each direction gives you more direction, it becomes some hard decisions to me. So even in this area, they're starting to become a very long edge. So, you know, I try to avoid letting these long faces get created by, you know, kind of dicing up these areas a little bit. Like right here, there's another long face situation being created. And these things will definitely cause some shading issues, even worse than the ones that I'm seeking to fight against. So let's just clean that up just a tad. And there's our circle, and we extrude it out. And let's just sharpen it. Let's fully sharpen it. All right, we're just trying this by the book. That is not a darn circle. In fact, I have to scale it up to make it more circular. So it's something like that. So that is still not down. That is tough, you guys. I mean, even this geometry is tough. Like, I don't like this geometry. I mean, even when I shrink wrap it, I could already just imagine what the result would be. I mean, these are some tough geometrical conundrums that I'm talking about in these videos. And I mean, the point of them is really to help you guys get a better understanding of how you can get the most out of Blender, but also understand why things go awry and askew and afoul. In fact, to show another example, you know, people always want to come into Blender and just immediately cut into a cylinder. So let's do that. Let's do this, but we want to solve it this time using only easy tools. So no topo hacking. Let's get in here and let's just hit it with the old weldy weld, and we just roll it, and bam, this thing is ready for a Friday night. So I just want to show that, you know, the game is definitely changing, but it is a gradual change. In fact, the next level is putting a bevel on it, and we see that, you know, we're able to even slap a bevel on this thing. We see the shading kind of breaking down a little bit here as well, but that's nothing a little quarantine box can't solve. Just quarantine that area off from the rest, and that could help. However, looks like we could use just a little bit more assistance. So we'll put a line there, and that one actually broke the auto smooth information. But let's see, we got our weld, we got our boolean, and we want our boolean to happen first and then our weld, of course. So boolean, weld, bevel. In fact, we turn the weld back on. You can see the difference in the results between not having a weld and having a weld. So the game is definitely changing and getting better for the most part whenever it comes to dealing with shading and topological issues, because previously this was not like such a capability. And I mean, the percentage of this working the way I just showed is like, I don't know, 30%, but it's a percent now. Previously it was 0%, so 30% is pretty good. And I mean, I really feel that there's some worth in the weld. Like I always am telling people I'm talking to, I'm like, man, I think there's something good up in the weld, man. Just saying. Spent a lot of time looking at some welds. Welds be looking pretty mighty fine. So let's do it again. Can lightning strike twice? The audience asks. So we do it again. And this is our result, right? We got this frowny face. This is our topo. So what can weld do for that? Well, weld can do that for that. And that's actually not bad at all either. In fact, we switch this back over to box, and we use knife to just kind of work our angle in right here just to give it something to connect to. And we see that most of these areas up here are pretty trashed, but it's less trashed than before. Like most of these areas actually found their way home. It's that when things get sideways with these long skews and you get like super long faces of varying shape because of being n-gons, that's where things start to get a little bit more complicated. In fact, we could even take this shape and just dice it like so. And that would probably give it a slightly better chance. But I also find that dice can increase the variability of a result as well, especially when you have the dice points near a convergence. You can actually cause dice to you cause weld to kind of jump the track and start welding with things that it shouldn't weld with. So in a way, weld does best with simplicity. It'll simply jump to the best choice, but you give it too many choices, it will jump to some interesting partners, to say the least. But let me double check this topo video. And telling you, I hate it when I don't get a perfect result. So, I mean, what did I do wrong? You know, I never count the stuff I give things. So, you know, right here, I'm looking at it. We'll give it 6 segments, which if we give it 6 segments, that means that we can be real gentle with our curve. So let's bisect that, and we'll choose to screw it. And we can't adjust anything non-destructively because I just applied everything, but let's give it a, actually this one has only 6 segments, so that means we only need a 16-point cylinder. You know, me, I'm trying to find some low numbers that I can rock with on the solving game, so don't blame me. So we make this a union, which looks like that. And so we convert the geometry to mesh and we sharpen it. It looks like that. And we can lower our auto smooth till things look all right. And we can, you know, hack our border and shade our border just right so it looks something like that. And then we can slap a level of sub D on it, maybe 2. And it looks like our cylinder was plopped into the side of this. So let's talk about topological cleanup. So the first thing for this that we probably want to experiment with is control. So I'm going to select this whole shape. We're going to press I in order to inset it, and we see that that doesn't work. So that means we're going to need to manually interject control all throughout this entire shape. So we'll select this, M last, these two, we'll join them here. I mean, as long as they're within a containment area, they should be fine. Right here, we're actually moving geometry that plays a major part of the form. So we want to start adding more containment. Actually, the knife, the buck with the knife ends there for me, I guess. All right, and the geometry is going to hate that. I just kind of really barged my way into town, but I think we can pull it off. Actually merge these things, and I wonder who's messaging me because I'm just getting beeps for it, but we'll just focus on the content at hand. J, we can dissolve that. We can Okay, I guess that's the grid showing up in that area. So this time we're actually going to maintain our purity rule all the way around, which means that in order to replace and consolidate geometry, we have to consolidate before it actually gets to the problematic point. So that means that for this area it's fine, but for this thing it's going to need to actually be evaporated. So we can actually just merge that here at last, but we're going to need to dissolve that. And you know, these areas can live, they just can't live around the main area as stuck out points, being broken connections, because it's going to be problematic later. So this experiment, we're just experiment a little bit and just kind of changing the rules and how we go about it. I mean, there's a little bit of a long skew diamond there, so that's why this geometry was kind of low to help that out, but we'll just continue on. We'll merge these two and just slide around, and we'll do the same with this thing, except how do we want to solve it? Because we're starting to get to the area where we're discussing messing with our outermost wall, which is our most sacred area. We don't want to change that, so let's just merge it last. And for this piece, it almost doesn't even have to exist in the context of this piece, but it's important for holding this particular form. So the conundrum is, how do you solve such a shape? The best choice is definitely going to be to dissolve that and get it out of here. As far as topological continuity, with forcing this 18 to take over this, I'm guessing probably 32 or something, let's count it, 36. So we have a lot of these choices that we actually have to make due to having uneven counts. And so I feel like understanding these sort of decisions in topology is like the secret to being the most capable of modeler. So we'll select these 3, maybe 4, merge it last. And with these, we can also start thinking about possibly quarantining, protecting this particular area. So let's do it again. And we're just cutting along. Move it last. Move it last. And we'll just merge these at last here. And we can see that the topology is getting a little bit crazy because I'm making just some very heavy-handed decisions. You can also see that some of my decisions are becoming a little lax. Like I'm making choices based on keeping 2 surface continuities at the same time, maybe even 3. And, you know, it gets a little hairy. So because of that, my choices are kind of simplified at this point. In fact, I'm sticking with the same rules as before, where I want to keep mainly the perimeter of the cylinder going when it comes to the connection. However, with the terminations, I have been trying to minimize it to create a less triangle dependent area on the surrounding spots. But you can see that, you know, with the geometry lower, there's more mass to play with. And the choices you make impact more things. So when you slide something around, you're impacting things that you possibly didn't even want to impact. So we look at this final area, and the easiest solution is to take these 2 and just merge it at last, which basically ends this puzzle. You know, if I was hating this puzzle and I just wanted it over, I just got to the Shangri-La of it, except for occasional issues I'll need to solve. But if we start just, you know, this area is not marked. Sometimes you lose your marking, but it'll stay blue. We can see that for the most part, some of these areas almost worked. And sub D is really a very specific type of auditor. Bevel is another type of auditor. And what I mean by that is, you know, when we put sub D on the mesh, you can see how sub D interprets your mesh. when you put bevel on your mesh, you can see how bevel interprets your mesh. Whether, you know, it finds your edges to be good enough of marking to have like a continuous bevel, and then, you know, subdivisions determining if your geometry's points are converging in a way where it if they converge enough to constitute as creases, or if they're sparse enough to just be simplified and extrapolated by the algorithm. So let's look at this from the front. And how many segments do I need? Probably that many. And we can just play with the offset. I like rotating this thing like Wheel of Fortune. But for some reason, I always get like kind of iffy results with it. So we'll probably need to go back a level, extrude, just flatten it, go with the grid fill, play with our offset control, maybe go to 1. And that's actually a slightly better result. You know, we'll crease it so it gets a nice little bevel. And we're just kind of looking at our handiwork of integrating such a big curve into another big curve that's also slightly curved. So the ultimate geometric conundrum of modeling. And then of course, you know, if I could, I would just go in with Mesh Machine and show you how we would just hack our way through this in just moments. But that comes with its own set of issues, especially if you decide that you want to go back in and begin editing or making modifications. It does change the road that you're on, but it is definitely a road worth exploring if you're getting into Blender and exploring all of these tools. You know, topology is just my recommendation to all users for just kind of mastering how things get put together and how curves get connected between each other. In fact, we can grab this edge at this point and just remove it because we have the shape. In fact, this area is the last really questionable area, and we'll just solve it like so. And you know, sub D is going to be very harsh on this because of the simplicity of the geometry that we're looking at here, but it has been now solved in a way that makes it more optimal for surviving both bevel and subdivision. So I think with that, I will be able to wrap up this video finally and call it a day on that topic. Topology is one of those things that just makes my head dizzy talking about eternally. So I hope these videos were helpful to someone.